Don't worry. Here is a person who is going to share his wonderful insights. And he is none other than Professor Dr. Lakshmi Raj Sharma, a novelist of great repute. He also dons various other hats, including dramatist, poet, and academician. So the Department of EFL extends a very, very warm welcome to Professor Lakshmi Raj Sharma. I thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. And I would like to hand over the session to my colleague Savita for an introduction of the chief guest.
Thank you.
Savita ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I am profusely elated to take this opportunity to introduce our guest of the day. Professor Lakshmi Raj Sharma is an Indian author, novelist, dramatist, poet, and academician. He is currently professor at the Department of English and Modern European Languages at the University of Allahabad. He was selected for the Indian Civil Services but opted for an academic career, giving proper justice to his love for literature and writing. He is well known for his debut novel, The Tailor's Needle, which explored the British rule in India, and furthermore for his collection of short tales, Marriages or Made in India, and Intriguing Women. He has published several short stories in American journals and papers. His latest fiction book, the novella Saba and Nisha, a love story, was published in September 2017. We Should Not All Be Feminists is his forthcoming novel. He has published a number of academic books, the chief of which is the T.S. Eliot Middleton Murray debate in 1994. Among his best published articles are Charles Dickens and Me, published in the Oxford Journal English, and one on Thomas Hardy's poetry, published in the Hardy Society Journal, UK. We have amidst us today such a great academician, and I am very much honored to invite him to take over the session. Welcome you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for saying such kind words about me. I wish all of you a very good afternoon, and I wish to thank uh, Professor and Head Dr. Rima and the conveners, Dr. Savita, Dr. Nagami, and Dr. Walter Hugh Parker for having me over today to speak to you. I do not claim that I have some magic formula of reading a novel very well. And there is, in fact, no one way of reading it very well. But what I wish to do today is to tell you, not only as a professor, but as a novelist, what you should look for and what role the reader has in, in a novel. The novelist first writes something, puts something onto the page, and then he hands it over to the publisher. And the publisher produces a book that then comes into the hand of a reader. So it is the reader actually who brings alive a novel. And that is what I would like to tell you. First and foremost, dear reader, you are a very important person in the reading of a novel, because without you, the novelist is dead. You have to bring to life the novel. You have to bring to life the novel. And it is only when you have brought to life the novel that you will, find meaning in it. So the reader has to do a lot of things. And I would like to discuss all these things today. I do not know how many I will be able to remember. I have some points jotted down on some pages, but I always, tend to forget some of the things that I'm talking about as I read. So, first of all, the reader has to decide what kind of novel he or she is going to read. Because there are various kinds of novel, and not every novel is suited to every reader. So I would like to say, what Barthes has pointed out, Roland Barthes has said, that there are two kinds of novels. There are two kinds of writing basically. One is readerly writing and one is writerly writing. So if you wish, the students can note down that readerly writings are those which are reader friendly writings. They are easy to understand and grasp. Some novels are written in that reader friendly way, where the reader becomes almost a passive receiver of everything that the novelist has to give. But some of the classics are also written in that mode. But there are other kinds of novels which are writerly novels, in which the reader has to work very hard. He has to work extremely, or she has to work extremely hard to get into the novel. Getting into the novel and then remaining, happily positioned in the novel is not a very simple task for a writerly novel. Because there the reader is not a passive receiver, but he is an active, worker in the process of reading. In both kinds of writing, the reader has to contribute a great deal, actually. Because the reader has to step into the world of a novel very responsibly, with the help of images and with the help of metaphors and the various narrative techniques that a reader has used. One has to enter the universe of a novel. So one has to leave one's own universe, one's own world, and get into that world which has been created for the reader. What kind of an experience is this? This is not a very simple experience, let me tell you. You have to just pay attention to the words and sentences. If you pay attention to the words and sentences, then you will automatically be transported into a novel. You will be introjected into a novel. What is the meaning of introjection? Norman Holland has told us about this process. Introjection basically means becoming a part of someone else's world, someone else's worldview, someone else's opinions, and forgetting your own for that time being. So introjection is something that is required for a reader initially. And stepping into the novel means being transported into that world where your own world will cease to matter to you at that time. Now, you see, there is a word called perceiving. Perceiving or perception means looking at something with your senses, no doubt, with your mind connected to your senses and perhaps to your soul. When you look at something from your whole being, you become a part of that thing. So generally, when we read science or when we read history or something like that, geography, we use our minds to understand these subjects. But when we read literature, or generally when we read a novel, we begin to perceive things differently. When we perceive, we stop acting. This is important. Our personal actions come to a standstill, and we become a part of someone else's world and his or her actions. And that is how, we become a part of the world to which we are taken. It may be a real world or a realistic world. Actually, there is no real world, because no novelist can produce 100% real world. It is just not possible. But some writers try to be realistic, and some take us into a magical world. And this magical world can be very different. But we cease to disbelieve whatever we are seeing in this magical world. Why does that happen? Aristotle told us for the first time that when we go to see a play, we, are transported into the world of the theater. And at that time, we begin to feel the tragic emotions of any character or the tragic character, and we forget who we are, and we begin to feel the suffering that someone else is suffering. There is a certain kind of impersonality, a disinterestedness on the part of the reader when he does this or she does this. There is a kind of disinterestedness. If there were no disinterestedness, then the reader would not want to read it, because then he would suffer as much as the tragic hero or the protagonist. So what happens is we perceive things. And when we perceive things in a novel with a certain disinterestedness. And it is this disinterestedness which helps us to get into the world and to forget our own world. Remember, disinterestedness does not have any negative connotations. It is not uninterestedness, but it is an impersonal, leap into the world of the novel. So we actually stop acting when we enter another world. When we are in our own world, we are always acting. Our minds are thinking of everything around us. Does this one need help? Does that one need help? Am I doing everything right? Am I feeling thirsty? All those things are forgotten at that time. And one just leaps into another world, a world which may be absolutely untrue. Now, S.T. Coleridge has given us the real concept of the willing suspension of disbelief. The willing suspension of disbelief is actually nothing else but our having stopped our actions and our faculty of disbelief. Once we enter that world, then we cannot stop disbelieving. We cannot sort of shut our disbelief, the faculty of our disbelief. We are always believing everything. And therefore, the reader can be given any kind of lies. Remember, all fiction is lies. It is not true. But we believe it because it may not be factually true, but it takes us towards a general truth of life. It helps us to see a certain moment of life. It helps us to see large chunks of time in the life of someone. It takes us towards a place that we may not have ever been to, or we may never go to, but we are there and we see everything. We see not only with our eyes, but we see with our whole being. We see with our entire, you know, body and mind. So, when we read a novel, we enter into someone else's world and we do not disbelieve whatever that person is saying, even if what he or she is saying is in contradiction to what we actually believe. Even if that is a contradiction to what we believe, we still believe everything that we are told. So, the first request that I make to the reader is not to trouble himself or herself with disbelief. In fact, you cannot do that too much, because if you disbelieve, then you'll shut the novel and you won't read it also for very long. But one should be a little patient. Sometimes a novelist builds up the world very gradually and you find it quite boring. But when you work hard with a novel that seems to be boring initially, it can become a very rewarding experience. Because if it is not going to be a rewarding experience, then the publisher will not publish that novel. If the publisher has published the novel, then he will want to get his money back. And in order to get it back, he will only select that or choose that novel which will not be a headache for the reader. So you should trust the publisher's, choice of publishing a particular novel, and you should read on till you get hooked on to it. Therefore, some publishers expect writers to write novels that hook you on from the very first sentence. But that is spoiling a novel also, because a writer may want to build up his world gradually and take you into it to a deeper extent than merely hooking you on. Because when you are hooked on mentally, more mentally than anything initially. Later on only do you get hooked on with your entire being. But in the beginning, you get hooked on only mentally. And gradually, you proceed, towards getting hooked on as a reader with your entire being, with your soul and your body. Today, I'm going to talk about the soul and the body with the example of a particular novel. But just let me tell you that the reader is a very, very, very big person, because it is he or she that controls the publisher and his choice to publish. If novels are not read, then publishers will not publish future novels of that author. So that author will be put to death, all right? So the readers are very powerful in every sense. First of all, they make a novel alive. They bring life into a novel by reading it attentively. And then, so they must have a lot of literary awareness of, point of view, narrator, and various literary devices like defamiliarization and, alliteration, idiomatic expression, grammatical and non-grammatical language. Sometimes a novelist will not use grammar at all, as there is a novel called Londonstani by Malkani, where grammar is totally flouted and the narrative moves through dialogue and ungrammatical language. So these are various literary techniques, and these should not be taken lightly. As students of literature, particularly, we need to have some, basic awareness of what literary techniques and devices are. So once we have that, then we think of entering a novel. And today I will take up a few examples of how a novelist makes you enter his or her novel, and what he does initially or she does initially in the novel, so that you are comfortably settled within a novel. So now I'll give you just a half-minute pause and I'll go on to the first novel of today. The first novel that I'm going to talk about is a novel which you have already read, I'm sure, and that is Pride and Prejudice. Okay, I will read with you the very first few sentences of this novel to help you see how you enter a novel's universe. The novel begins in this manner. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Now see, this is a woman writing. This is a woman writing. And she's telling us something about the male sex. What is the psychology of men? She's looking at men from their other gender, from the point of view of their other gender. It is a truth universally acknowledged that anyone who has wealth will be looking out for a good wife. That is how Jane Austen, saw the situation. And then she says, however little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered the rightful property. He considered the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. All right. Now we get to know that the daughters are more important than anything else, because the man will ultimately become the rightful property of the daughters. This is how a woman can look at the world. She can think of a man as no more than someone who is to become the property of a woman. So we know what to expect when we read such an opening, that there will be women looking for good husbands so that they can, first of all, become their wives, and then the men can become very useful to them, almost belong to them, just as everything else in the house belongs to them. So that is how Jane Austen begins her novel. But interestingly, though it begins with how a man behaves when he has money, the whole novel turns out to be how women behave actually when that rich man comes. So now if you just take the first sentence, you may be misled about what the novel will ultimately be, because you will think that it is only about a man who's rich. But it turns out to be about so many women who are interested in getting married to men, because this is from the woman's point of view that we are being given everything. Though Jane Austen cannot be described only as a woman novelist, she is definitely a woman novelist, but she has the ability of entering the male experience as well. Remember, literature and fiction have the ability of taking you across genders. They take you across genders. A woman can write as a man, and a man can write as a woman. Because when a man creates a woman character, he naturally has to know what it is to be a woman. Because a person who writes fiction is a very sensitive being. He can see what a man feels in a certain situation and what a woman feels in, in that situation or in another situation. This is why you as the reader must also be able to be empathetic to whatever is being shown to you. You should not say, well, why should I read a novel which is only about women who are looking for husbands? No, you must read it because tomorrow you will be facing women in your own life, and you must know how women behave and how Jane Austen has projected the behavior of women. You know, Mrs. Bennet is a woman who's so excited about the fact that some new people have come to the neighborhood. And she and her husband, who's a man, is not that excited. He says, so what? If they have come, they have come. She says, but why are you so senseless? Can't you understand that that we have so many daughters, and one of them will easily marry one of these men who have come. But Mr. Bennet is not that interested because he has seen the world more practically than a woman of those times could see. Of course, today's women are just like men, and they may have seen even more than men can ever see. But in those times, women used to stay inside homes, and therefore their knowledge of the world was very limited. Their knowledge of the world was extremely limited. Okay, so that is one way of entering the novel, looking at, expecting for something to happen. Sometimes what is expected is very different to what actually happens. And therefore, what you must remember is that you must keep yourself very busy with what is happening within the novel. Be very attentive. Okay, now I will tell you about another novel, the beginning of another novel. And that novel is A Thousand Splendid Things by Khalid Hosseini. And in this novel, the first sentence of this novel, I'll just tell you the first sentence of this novel after opening this novel. This has a very powerful first sentence. And I will only tell you about the first sentence of the novel because it is, a very powerful sentence, and that helps you to enter the novel very effectively. Now, how does it begin? The first sentence of this novel is, Mariam was 5 years old the first time she heard the word harami. Mariam was 5 years old the first time she heard the word harami. This is the first sentence. In fact, it is the first paragraph of the novel. So, what happens? First of all, we get to see that there is a little girl, just 5 years old, and she is being exposed to a very cruel circumstance. She is being exposed to abusive people, maybe men. So, from the very first sentence, we get to know that Mariam is going to suffer. And we get interested in What kind of suffering is she going to feel? Just as Charles Dickens's novels take us to the suffering of so many children, or Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things take us to the suffering of two children, takes us to the suffering of two children. So similarly, Many Splendid, Thousand Splendid Suns is a novel which will show us, which will expose before us the suffering of a lot of children. No, there are two girls actually, and how they grew up and how much suffering they have to go through, because society in Afghanistan is male oriented and women are hardly considered anything in that society. They are used and abused like anything, and that is what you see in this novel. So the opening of the novel takes you into the cruel world that a child will suffer. Okay, now I will tell you about another novel, which is uh, uh, just 1 minute. This is a novel I'm going to tell you a little more about. The novel is called Lady Chatterley's Lover. It was published in 1928, but it was then banned. And in only 1960 did it get published in the UK, and then after that it got published in America. And then it becomes a very, very important novel for anyone who wants to know Lawrence. Why was it banned, first of all? It was banned because it was believed that there was too much sex in it. It was too much at the physical level. But later on, Lawrence told us that sex was not just sex for him. It was like a medicine. It was like a religion. It could hold on a person's whole being in some cases, just as religion can hold on. So it was almost something that he saw spiritually. Now, what happens in the novel called Lady Chatterley's Lover? I'll just tell you very briefly. There is a man called Sir Clifford Chatterley. He gets married to a woman called Constance Reed. So she becomes Lady Chatterley. And they live happily for a few years only, when war breaks out between England and Germany, and Sir Chatterley has to go to the battleground, and he gets seriously injured. And when he gets injured, the lower part of his body, from his, stomach, below his stomach up to the legs, gets paralyzed. And therefore, it becomes almost lifeless. And so he comes back to his mansion, where his wife, his beautiful wife, has to stay alone almost, because he is lying in bed, and most of the time he needs a nurse who keeps looking after him, or most of the time, in the morning and in the evening and in the night also. And his wife has to sleep alone in another room, and she begins to get very lonely. So Clifford tells her, Constance, I can understand that you're getting very lonely. And so, if you wish, you can have some relationship with another man. Because I can understand how a woman would feel if she is not, coming close to a man. So she looks at him. She doesn't say much in reply. But the important thing is that Sir Chatterley, Clifford Chatterley, has said this to his wife, and it is very easy for a man to tell his wife, you can have a relationship with another man. But such things are not to be believed in, because no man will tolerate his wife going to another man. And as luck would have it, when the nurse comes, this man doesn't want his wife to sit near her too much, because he's always conscious of the fact that he's not a complete man for his wife. So he prefers staying in the company of the nurse. And the nurse is all the time working hard to improve his health. And she will ultimately succeed in making him stand up, but very weakly with the help of crutches. So he tells her to go into the woods of his county and go and see whether the hens are hatching properly, because he has worked hard for them to hatch. And over there is a gamekeeper. A gamekeeper is one who looks after the hens and who also, is a hunter and who brings meat to the Lord's table. So this gamekeeper is called Mellers. His name is Mellers. And he's physically a very strong man, as compared to Clifford, who is a lord and not that strong physically. Now, when she goes to see the hens, at that time, Mellers is standing absolutely naked, and he is taking a bath. He's having a bath. And she sees him and she hides behind a tree and watches his body, because she is greatly, attracted towards him. And when he looks, she runs away, of course. She comes back. But then her husband tells her to go again the next day, because he doesn't want her to sit in the house and brood. So she goes again. And then when she goes, she meets Mellers. And Mellers and she gradually begin to fall in love. And then they have a physical relationship. And Mellers is able to satisfy the lady as her husband never could have. And then she realizes that this is the man who she wants. In Lawrence, we often have this kind of an experience where ladies are not very happy with their own husbands and they find someone else more interesting, or men are not very happy with their own wives and they find some other woman interesting. This is what happens in Lawrence very often. So you see, this lady ultimately comes closer and closer to Mellers, and her husband begins to suspect that she has come very close to him. And he becomes more and more indifferent to his wife. He starts ill-treating her, and he hardly shows any emotion to her or for her. This is what makes her very unhappy. And one day, when in the night she has gone to the cottage that Mellers lived in, her husband is able to come out and sit on, his balcony. He's able to sit on his balcony and wait for her to return. He's able to sit on his balcony and wait for her to return. And then he sees her coming, and he also sees the other person, Mellers, who has come with her. And then after that, he's very angry. He sends his wife away to her parents, and he dismisses Mellers from his service. So, but after some time, his health is improved and he comes back. And when his health is improved, he calls his wife back, or she comes back on his own, because she has not read his letters. She tears them up, but she comes on his own, because she bears the child that Mellers is the father too. And she remembers, she thinks that her husband will be happy that his wife is going to deliver a child, but actually he cannot tolerate the idea of another child, that to the child of a man of such a low social rank. So what is Lawrence telling us through this? He's telling us about the body and the mind, the body and the soul, the body and the mind. We all have a body and we have a mind. And both these need to be appeased. If you are happy in the mind, or if you are happy in the soul, but you're not happy in the body, as Clifford Chatterley was, then you cannot remain a balanced person. And similarly, in the case of his wife, she was bodily happy, all right, but she was very frustrated because her mind, her heart, her soul wanted more. She wanted to feel more complete as a woman. And that she felt only when Mellors came close to her. So, this kind of awareness comes to us when we read a novel like Lady Chatterley's Lover, that both the aspects have to be, kept balanced, the body and the mind. Like Lady Chatterley's Lover, every novel that you read will tell you something. It will give you some kind of knowledge, some kind of sensitivity. We go to a novel to get something. It can be sheer pleasure, just delight, or it can be some kind of utility. It could be any of the two things. All right. And neither of the two things is entire, because both of them come in a combined form in a novel. Delight and utility come in a combined form. There is aesthetic pleasure which a novel provides, artistic pleasure. You are aesthetically detached personally from a novel as a reader, but you get into the novel's world and you start enjoying the novel because there is some art in it. Art gives you pleasure. And there is also utility. You learn something from it. Wayne C. Booth has written 2 very good books on novel reading, the theory of the novel. One is The Rhetoric of Fiction, which was written in the early parts of the 80s, and then in 1988 came his second book, The Company We Keep, which is another important book. And in this book, he tells us that, the reader and the novelist are like companions. We are like companions. The novel is a gift given to us by the novelist, who's our companion. So, the company we keep will make us certain kinds of people. If we are only interested in, say, crime fiction, then a certain faculty of our minds will develop as readers. We will get to know more about crime, about how crimes are committed and how people hide their criminality. That will happen. But if we read the literary kind of novel, then the story will move more slowly, no doubt. But we will learn more about life because it will be truer to life. It will be more varied in its experience. Little details of life will be given to us. And we must take in those details because, remember, everyone experiences life differently. You may look at life in one perspective, and another person may have experienced life in another perspective, and you are forced to get into his world and experience life as he has or she has experienced it, and you should be and you will improve a lot by that. Therefore, reading fiction is a very, very essential thing for most educated and uneducated people, if they can read. You see, one thing that happens by reading fiction in English is that your language improves. Why does your language improve? And I'm going to give you a theory, which is my own theory. Why does your language improve when you read English fiction or you read fiction in any other language? Because fiction is emotionally charged. You know what is the meaning of emotionally charged? It is something in which words are not only uh, unilinear, they don't only have one meaning for everything, but they have layers of meaning, and those meanings are connected to the heart of the writer and the imagination of the writer. Because they are connected to the heart and the imagination of the writer, therefore they are, they become emotional. Words are emotional. A mother is emotionally linked with her baby. When the baby understands nothing in this world, the baby understands what the mother wants to say. And that is why it gradually picks up the mother tongue, whatever the mother says. If the mother says, for a particular, with a glass of water, says water, gradually the child knows that this is water. If the mother says come, by signaling, the baby knows that it means, what it means. He understands. Why? Because he's emotionally connected with the mother. Therefore, the mother tongue comes without the knowledge of grammar. It comes very easily. Similarly, a novel also makes you get connected with the emotions of the author. You get emotionally connected with the author. And because you get emotionally connected with the author, therefore, you enter his world, and the language which he uses over the stretch of the novel gradually seeps into your own vocabulary, and it becomes a part of your own vocabulary, and you begin to learn the language even if you don't know the grammar. So if you read a lot of fiction, if you read a lot of novels, you automatically learn the language. And I personally feel that there is no better way of learning the language than reading a lot of fiction, because you are emotionally involved when you learn. Emotion, when you are emotional, there is a certain kind of sensation in your body. It is like coduction. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, coduction. Coduction is a state, it is something, it describes the passing of heat energy from one medium to another. Coduction, or even electricity, the movement of electricity. Emotion also similarly passes through our blood. When we read fiction, then our blood gets charged in a certain way, which leads our inner emotions to move out. The root meaning of emotion comes from a French word, which is émoi, and that word means moving out. Moving out means from your heart, something is moving out. And that is why emotions are always, moving. Their impulses in your body are sort of set in motion, because of which you cannot remain in your own world. You are in another world, in another universe, where you are totally connected with another world. Okay, now, since I am also a minor novelist, and because I would like you to know a little about my own novel, I will also take you to the beginning of my own novel. And the beginning of the title of my novel is The Tailor's Needle, which was first published in Great Britain, and then it was published by Penguin India. I think it was in 2012. It was published in 2012. All right, now it begins this way. There is the first phrase which is mentioned is Dehradun, 1933. So by mentioning the place and time, the novelist takes you into a particular place and into a particular time. You are automatically introjected into that time and that place. Okay. So once you're introjected, then the first sentence is Yogendra surveyed his father's face. So what is the novelist telling you? that he's surveying his father's face. He wanted to say something, but the words would not surface to his lips. He couldn't just blurt out things. It was, after all, a matter so fragile and close to his heart. It could fall to pieces in a moment. Now, why has this been given to you? Because Yogendra has fallen in love at a time when India is going towards, a freedom struggle, with Mahatma Gandhi getting all important men into the movement, Mahatma Gandhi and others, getting all the important people who can join. Now, at a time when people are expected to join the Indian national movement so that India can get its freedom, Yogendra has made the mistake of falling in love. Falling in love is like some kind of falling. It is like falling into a ditch, which you realize only later on. All right. So this is what he has realized. But he's surveying his father's face. His father is a very, very grand personality, Sir Saraswati. He's a very grand personality. And Yogen doesn't know how to tell him that at a time when I should be, helping you to think of of India's freedom struggle, I'm only thinking of the person I love. This is because we are human. We sometimes, get into the wrong situations, and this is what we get to know when we begin reading the Tailor's Needle. The Tailor's Needle, is a metaphor for someone who's very flexible, like a needle, which passes into every kind of cloth. So, the novel is something which actually gives you the worldview of a particular author with the help of effective narration. Narrators are very important. I don't have the time to tell you this, but but what I'm trying to tell you is that novels are very effective ways of learning. If you are traveling in the UK, particularly by bus or by train, you will find that most people will always carry a novel in their hand. And they will sometimes finish it during the journey and put the novel on the seat and leave if they have completed it for others to sit and read. So novels actually bring you up to date. And the way they teach you, nothing else can. Shakespeare has said, all the world's a stage. That means the whole world is like a stage, because we are all actors, but it also means that the world can fit onto a stage. But conversely, we can also say that the stage contains the whole world. We can say that. And just as all the world's a stage, in the novel, all the world's a page. The page can contain the entire world, and you have to experience the entire world by reading the novel as truly as you have to surrender yourself to the universe of the novel. Later on, you can disagree with whatever is said there, but at the time when you read, you cannot but read the novel very attentively. See, I'm going to tell you something which will engage you. See, I'm telling you something. Please pay attention to what I'm going to tell you. It was a dark night. I walked alone. There was a very big iron gate, which I pushed. It creaked open. I went inside. There was no one inside the gate. I saw some graves. In the moonlight, the graves seemed to be like, beds. I sat on one of the graves and I heard the sound, "Thank you for sitting on me." I looked at the grave, looked back, and I saw no one. I got scared and I ran out of the gate. Now, see, this, what I'm telling you, is fiction. It is untrue. But when I tell you, you have to start believing in what I'm telling you. All right? Because you have to willingly suspend your disbelief. And that is what is the most important thing for a reader of a novel. So, with that, I will end my lecture today, my talk. Thank you for being such patient listeners. If there are some questions, please let me know. You can ask me after 1 minute or so.
Thank you so much, sir. What an erudite and wonderful presentation. And as a reader also, you have given us some insight how to go about reading a novel. And of course, there are a few questions in the chat box. I'll be reading out to you one by one, if you are ready with it. Participants, already some of you have given your questions there in the chat box. If anything is left out, you can just post it now itself so that it can be asked to the
But this,
resource person. Yes, sir.
yes, tell me.
Some questions are already posted, sir. I'll try
Okay,
to
you'll have to
read.
read them out, I
Yeah,
think.
yes, of course, sir. I'll read out one by one so that you can take time to answer them. Ramya has asked you to give some tips for slow readers because they have to reread from the beginning whenever they start reading a novel. They have to begin anew. So, what would be
Okay, now
your
I'll tell you
suggestion?
well, those who are very slow readers are not absolutely unfortunate readers, because those that read very fast often miss out a lot in a novel. Those who want to kill time and read quickly, they are not the best readers. So if you are reading slowly, then you are getting more layers of meaning into your novel. And I think you are a perfect reader. If you keep reading, then your speed will increase with practice. But I think you shouldn't be unhappy about being a slow reader, because Derrida has told us that we should slow down the reading process in order to get more meaning. You can never get the complete meaning of whatever is written, but you can get more layers of meaning by slowing down the reading process. So I think you should be very happy with yourself about that, Ramya.
So, thank you, sir. And
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure getting a reply from you.
The pleasure was mine also. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
thank you, Ramya ma'am. And one more person, Alamu Abhi, she has asked your guidelines for budding writers. So not just as readers, but as writers, they want your guidance.
Actually, that would take a very long time, because I often speak on how to write a novel. Today I'm speaking on how to read it. How to write a novel takes a good 1.5 hour or more. But if you keep reading a lot, if you read a lot, then you will automatically take in something that you should write and you should read. Just keep writing till you. Writing needs a lot of practice. I began to write when I was 45 years old, but then I was a very dumb kind of person maybe. Therefore, I took so long to learn how to write. But you might learn how to write much sooner than me. But you must try to write. Keep writing short stories. Write just 1 page a day. If you write 1 page a day, every day religiously, then you will become a writer. I can promise you. Write 1 page a day for 1 year, and you will have become good enough to write a novel.
Reading religiously, that is a wonderful explanation, sir. And Vishnu Priyan has asked how to encourage students to read a novel and how to develop their critical thinking.
Pardon, what was the first part of your question?
How to encourage students, as freshers, to read a novel and how to develop
How to
their
encourage
critical
them?
thinking. Yes.
Then I think to encourage freshers to read novels, you have to tell them about interesting novels. You have to tell them what they will get from a particular novel if they have been able to read through it. Because, novels can be daunting because of their volume, because of their size. If you look at Don Quixote, which is one of the very great novels that has been written, it is so thick and it has more than 1,000 pages. So someone might not want to pick it up only because it's so big and so voluminous. But if someone tells the reader about what the reader will get, the reader might feel encouraged to read that novel. So you can say impressive things, interesting things about the novel. I think that will help the reader.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not sure whether I've answered that here.
Ashwini has asked how to read a novel as a researcher. People doing PhD maybe, how to read.
All right. Now, when you read as a researcher, whenever I read a novel as a researcher, I get it photocopied, first of all, which is something illegal, actually. One shouldn't get a whole book photocopied, but I do something illegal. And then, after getting it photocopied, one side of the photocopying page should be blank. So when you read, you should keep underlining certain parts. You should mention something about the voice of the novelist in case you find something related to the voice. You should talk about the narrative, write something about the narrative, write something about the characterization, or something which is very unique about the plot, or any other quality that strikes you, so that when you have finished reading the novel, you have all your notes ready as a researcher, and then you will find it much easier to write down whatever you want to. I hope I've answered your question, Ashwini.
Yeah, that is an interesting explanation. I think it would be of much help to them. And a person by name Mrutyunjay has asked, how should a teacher read a novel for discussion in the class? I think this question is pertaining to us as teachers. How a teacher should read a novel in the class for the purpose of discussion. That is what is his question.
There are two things that strike me that you have asked. The first thing is, how should a teacher read the novel in class or read it privately?
Yes,
That is what
he has written it like that. The question asked by him is that how should he
read it in class?
In the class? Yes, because a novel cannot be taught in the class, right? So how should it be made possible?
Only some very important passages of the novel should be read in the class, and they should be read with a great involvement, with the teacher getting fully engrossed in the novel. Remember that a novel is cross-cultural, cross-gender, cross-race, cross-nationality. Like Arundhati Roy's Ministry of Utmost Happiness tells us about a eunuch in the beginning, and this eunuch is so interesting for us. So the teacher must read out portions that relate to the eunuch, so that those who do not like to be associated with eunuch can still, get involved properly while reading the novel. The teacher should get into the roles of the characters. Actually, getting into the role of a character is a very educative thing. It helps you to learn a lot. Even if you play a role on a stage, you learn a lot because you have got into someone else's character. So you have come out of yourself to learn something about another. If a man can play a woman's role on stage, then he will know a lot about what a woman is or how she feels in a particular situation. And similarly, if a woman can play the role of a man on stage, the same thing will happen. So a teacher should get into the role of a character and become that character, and then say what is to be read, and then read out passages which reveal the most characteristic things of that character. I hope, Mrityunjay, I have answered your question.
Yes, sir. And Vale Vili has asked a question. What is a character study in a novel? How to analyze its characters? Is it necessary to apply Freudian theories to study the characters?
Well, nothing is absolutely necessary. Freudian theories are very important. Freud is a very important theorist. And for literature particularly, his writings are very important. But you don't only have to think of Freud. You can think of a feminist, response, which is not very Freudian. Or you can think of a post-colonial response, or you can think of just the form of the novel, a formalistic response. You can think of any kind of theory to help you to read a novel. There is no hard and fast rule about only one theory that is needed. So read any theory that you like, and it will. But you must always say that you are reading the novel from a particular perspective, because no theory is complete in itself. So when you use a theory like Freudian theory, you are limiting your reading to certain complexes or certain sexualities that have been spoken of by Freud.
Yes, there is another question from Vinod Kumar Tiwari. Sir, when I read novel, sometimes my mind starts working on spin-off. So please tell me how to create an effective and good spin-off novel.
How to create a spin-off? Actually, if your mind is set thinking about a good plot or something, then write down that, or at least record it somewhere, so that whenever you are free, you can develop that idea. When I am reading something, I also keep getting hundreds of signals in my mind, but most of them get buried very soon, and I'm unable to record all of them. But that just shows that you're a very sensitive person, and you can write a novel someday if your language is good. So keep reading fiction to improve your knowledge. And I would be very happy if you read my novel, The Tailor's Needle, because I wrote this for my BA students, because I wanted them to improve their English. So I wrote it from that point of view also. Okay, so if you want, I've written it as a teacher for my students, actually. So if you want, you can begin reading The Tailor's Needle, which is published by Penguin.
And there is one general question from Elizabeth Rani. How to develop reading habits? It's a very common question everybody has, I think, and she has raised that question.
How to develop
reading
habits, means getting used, getting unused to other habits which you have. You have to just bring some more time for yourself, and you have to just sit down with a book in your hand and start reading. Force yourself to start reading till you start loving reading. You must have reading thrust upon you in case you are not fond of reading yourself. You must have, you must force yourself to start reading, because reading is what will take you to very great places in life. If you want to be someone very important in life, you have to read novels. If you run away from novel reading, then you will be an ordinary person. I can assure you that. So if you don't read novels, you have to read non-fiction, or you have to keep reading something, read subjects. But the best thing to do is to read fiction. You know, Q.D. Leavis, F.R. Leavis's wife, wrote a book in 1932, which was entitled Fiction and the Reading Public, in which she says that fiction is read, the amount of fiction which is read is 4 times more than the amount of other kinds of books that are read. And if readers do not read the right kind of fiction, then the right kind of fiction will begin to die. And then the wrong kind of fiction, you know, that which kills time, will only survive. And then publishers will only want to publish books which just tell you a story, or which can be made into a film quickly. So that will spoil, you know, the quality of fiction. So it is very important for readers to force themselves to read, even if they don't like to do it. All right.
Is one common question raised by many participants. They want you to suggest a few novels, or what are your favorite novels, they have asked. This question was asked by many participants, so I'm just placing it before
All right.
you.
I love one novel which is called What the Body Remembers,
Yes.
by Shauna Baldwin. This is a very recent novel. What the Body Remembers by Shauna Baldwin.
And will a teacher's interpretation influence? Yes,
No,
sir?
I would like to just mention a
Yes,
few more
yes.
novels. I
Definitely.
like all the novels of Khalid Hosseini very much, because they are very readable. And they are not just readable novels, but they are very deep, because they take you across nationality and across gender. They tell you how to feel for women also in a country where women are ill-treated so much. So I love those. Then there is a book called Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which is another very good book which takes you across race and gender. And it is set in Nigeria and America. These are some of the books which I have read in the last 1 or 2 years. There's a book called Tamarind Woman, a novel called Tamarind Woman by Anita Rao. I like that also very much. And of course, Arundhati Roy is a very fine novelist. But there is no novel which is as rich as Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children. I think it should be read, but it takes a lot of effort to read it. Yes, any other question that you have? I think you
Yes,
must have.
sir. From your answer, one person has asked a query. Professor Lingeshwari has asked, will a teacher's interpretation influence the students towards any character, style, or writer? I mean, will it be biased? You asked,
Yes,
you told, no, the teacher can introduce some novels or give a review of a certain novel to
yes,
encourage.
the teacher will always help to help, you know, make the students form an opinion.
Okay.
But the teacher must always say that his opinion or her opinion should not be taken as final. That is important. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I think there are no more questions to be asked. I'll just check. Yes, sir, we have come to the end of the session, and many have placed their appreciation for this wonderful session. And I would like to invite our HOD to give her words of appreciation and honor. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
I'll listen to her.
ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Nagamani.
Yes, ma'am.
If I should sum up in one sentence, experience speaks. That is what I can say. To start with, I think this aspect of willing suspension of disbelief was so vividly picturized by our guest speaker. That was just wonderful, sir. And one interesting aspect we came to know is that there should be no compulsion both on the part of the reader and the novelist when it comes to reading or writing the novel. But what was surprising is still now Actually, this is what I thought. I thought a novelist will have an impact on the reader's life, but you beautifully said that the reader has a great impact on the novelist continuing his journey. So that was another definite aspect that we all came to know. So I think you have presented so many perspectives, be it aesthetic, be it literary, or even scientific angle you showed us. So thank you so much, sir, and doing it with a few very interesting novels. Fortunately, some of them which we already know, so that we could relate to them. So it was very nice. Thank you so much. I want to thank you immensely for having spent your Sunday afternoon with us and having given us so many insights and enlightened so many members of the audience. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much for saying such kind words.
Thank you. Thank you. Nagamani, I think, shall we move to the formal vote of thanks by Dr. Savita?
Yes, ma'am. Over to Savita, ma'am. Ma'am, unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. We at SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram, Chennai, deem it a pleasure to host all the participants for the one-day national webinar on how to read a novel organized by the Department of English and Other Foreign Languages. We have been fortunate to have one of the eminent persons from academia, Professor Lakshmi Raj Sharma, an Indian author and novelist, and I heartily convey our gratitude to you, sir, for readily accepting our invite. There is a difference between reading for understanding and reading for information. And how we read makes a massive difference to knowledge accumulation. Sir has given us clear inputs on the various strategies to make reading a novel easy. Thank you, sir, for having enlightened us with your commendable talk and the valuable inputs given. I am very much thankful to our management, heads of institution, for continuous support and advice, which has greatly helped towards the successful organization of this webinar. My heart fills with lots of gratitude to our head of the department, Dr. Rama, for her huge support in all our endeavors. With deep sense of appreciation, I recognize the joint coordinators, Dr. Nagamani and Dr. Walter Hugh Parker, for their constant support and for ensuring that this webinar becomes a memorable success. I profusely thank the fraternity of teachers and research scholars for joining us from various universities and colleges. This is a unique opportunity to learn from the best from academia. And I feel the participants were able to extract best results and hope your takeaways were satisfactory. Without your kind presence, we could not have accomplished what we had dreamt for. I also would like to thank all the respected delegates for taking their valuable time out and ensuring your presence here. I sincerely thank all my colleagues in the department for their enthusiasm and valuable suggestions contributed at every point of time. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Savita, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir, for joining with us, and it was wonderful day, and you have
I
made the
also
year
enjoyed
a great,
talking to
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
You're
much, sir.
most
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Have a great year ahead, sir. Ma'am,
Okay, Nagamani.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This has
Okay,
gone
Savita. Savita,
Yes, ma'am.
shall we?
Some people are joining even now. I
So
do not
you,
know.
so I think you have posted the feedback link, right?
Yes, ma'am. We have
Yes,
posted,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. See you tomorrow. Savita, ma'am.
Yes.
நாளைக்கு இது நினைச்சு இன்னும் பயமா இருக்கு.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, see you, ma'am. இன்னொருக்கு போஸ்ட் பண்ணிருக்கேன். ஒரு 2 minutes I'll be staying back and
Okay.
yes, participants as they leave, no, I'll log out.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
1 or 2 times I'll just paste the feedback link and then I'll leave.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavita.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Yes, bye, Kavita. Velvili ma'am, thank you so much for your appreciation.